Hey.
Good morning.
I forgot to dance.
I didn't miss it.
You didn't?
I didn't miss it. No.
That might be the first time this year that I was in my mind. I was excited listening to my tune there, but I missed the dancing, kind of getting my notes and stuff ready. So, how are you, my friend?
Doing good. We're
Yeah,
guest list today. I feel like a bit of a empty nester type of thing here.
yeah.
We're
Isn't that
missing.
funny? I was thinking about that earlier. Although I got a commitment this morning from a guest I've been working on from quite some time for early December. So I think when I looked at the calendar, we're we only have like 6 left this year because we got the day after Thanksgiving, and then I think Christmas and New Year's fall around a weekend, so we probably will skip those. So got a lot to accomplish here before the new year comes.
Yep.
But good stuff. I think what's exciting, I'm looking forward to maybe seeing from some folks that are logged in with us and where they might be coming in from today. But just, our LinkedIn audience is growing all the time. I think we're probably up to 250, 300 people, pretty consistent coming in when I look at kind of unfortunately, LinkedIn doesn't give us good statistics, but in listening to people talk and people that they've shared things with, we're great there. But what I'm excited about is just on the LinkedIn audience today. I think we've got, where are we at? Brazil, I think Mexico, Canada, the Netherlands, Turkey, Germany, I think. So like 5-6 countries with us today on LinkedIn. Don't know about YouTube, Facebook, and then the podcast now, Around the Horn podcast on all the popular formats is hitting about 6 or 8 countries every week. So things are coming along. We're excited and we appreciate everybody's support.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's good timing. So before we dive in today, Tom, my good friend, let's dive in and do a little bit of our housekeeping that we try and do each week. And so I'm Kevin Brown, and this is my lifelong friend and business partner and co-host of the podcast, Tom Burton. And we get together every Friday on, as I mentioned earlier, LinkedIn Live, YouTube Live, Facebook Live, and we talk about the happenings in the world, the economy, mergers and acquisitions, sales, technology, artificial intelligence. We try and be a place where folks involved in manufacturing, wholesale distribution can come and get kind of a recap on what's happened in the week. We put out a newsletter every Friday morning as well. It is called Around the Horn and Wholesale Distribution. If you do not get that and you would like to, we would be more than happy to send that to you. You can either send us a note directly at hello@leadsmarttech.com, or you can go to the aroundthehornpod.com website and sign up for it there. And so we do this every Friday. If you don't get that newsletter and you'd like to, please let us know. We'd be happy to share that with you. Just as a little caveat, some of you will be listening to this later in the day versus the live broadcast that we're doing. You might be listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or Amazon or Odyssey or wherever it might be. If you're listening, you're not seeing the screen, which you're unfortunately not able to see these two handsome faces. But what we'll be looking at is that newsletter. So we'll look at that newsletter. We'll talk about the articles in there. So again, if you're listening in and not seeing us, that's what we're referencing. You could certainly look those articles up yourself or ask us for a copy of the newsletter. So, Tom, what did I miss there?
Nothing, but Ron set the bar for us here today. He says he's good to be here for another incredible session. So we better deliver here.
So RP better throw out some great comments.
That's right.
That's right. The one thing I will, before we dive in, the one thing I will ask people, and I'm going to do this unabashedly more and more because I haven't done enough of it, is we've developed a great audience and great friends and been getting some phenomenal guests joining us. But the way this gets out to more is if you share it with your friends. And so you can follow us at LeadSmart Technologies on LinkedIn, same LeadSmart Technologies on YouTube or Facebook. Just hit that follow, like, or subscribe button, and you'll get notified each week when we're going live. The other thing you can obviously do that's very beneficial to help this word get out about what we're doing is if you're listening on the podcast on Odyssey or Spotify or Apple, just hit that subscribe button and the like button so you'll get notifications each time we update. And it would be wonderful if you'd leave us a review. So we thank you for all of that. And now I guess we can dive into the news, huh?
Yeah, let's do it.
Good. So, we kind of gotten in the habit, and I think I dropped this on us, is that we usually start off with some dynamic of what's going on regarding economic news here in the U.S. where we're at, and much of the world tends to follow our economic situation as well. So we have an article from Reuters this week about some of the discussion about what's going on with what the Q3 looked really good in a lot of fashion, but then there's still some data out there talking about slowdown. And one of the things that intrigued me about this article, Tom, is you almost had three different perspectives from three different governors of the Fed.
Mhm.
I mean, to me, it's like, come on, speak from one voice.
Well, I don't think there is one voice. I think that's the issue,
Yeah,
right? I think there's a lot of different voices with a lot of potentially different opinions. Maybe that's what it's supposed to be.
it could be, I guess. Yeah, I hadn't thought of it
Yeah,
that way.
but yeah, I certainly don't believe that there's, from what we've seen and what we've heard, that there's a clear, defined absolute strategy,
Yep.
right? And the way that that's getting kind of ends up getting said is, well, we're going to, we'll watch the data. We'll watch the data as it goes along. But no, I don't think there's a clear strategy, and I think different opinions and different ideas from the different, different governors.
Well, it just triggered for me with that is it makes me I think what's going on, especially it's like Jerome Powell seems like a great guy, but man, it just seems I listen to him talk sometimes, and it's almost like I don't want to say talking in circles, but it makes me think of the sign you sometimes see in a restaurant, right? We reserve the right to refuse service. It's like we reserve the right to raise rates. We reserve the right to raise rates. We reserve the right to raise rates, and it's just this whole thing. And it's I what's and I'm far from an economist, but it kind of makes me wonder: is that 2% the right number? Right? When you see all the different impacts of, I mean, we live. One of these days, I've said this kind of stuff before, but I need to go research this. But you know, I just kind of look at we live in such a different world, right? We were going to talk a little bit more about AI today and the things that are changing. And the 2% piece that's in there, we weren't doing electronic trading or automated trading. We weren't the world economy was different, right? We didn't have the internet. We didn't have the global supply chain the way it is today. So I just kind of starting to wonder. There was an article in here from the woman from the Dallas Fed president. She commented that despite some progress, inflation is trending toward 3% rather than the goal of 2%. We saw those unemployment rates up last week. One of the things we didn't talk about in that article that I thought about afterwards, and then I heard it on the news the next day, was, I'm interested to see what November unemployment numbers are going to look like, because we had the auto strike and we had the writers and the actors strike still going on. So it'll be interesting to see if those strikes impacted that unemployment number or what it looks like in November. But I'm kind of wondering if there's a number somewhere different than that 2%.
I'm not an economist either, but I think there's a lot of, you have to understand that just arbitrarily saying we're going to go from a 2% to a 3% target has a lot of ramifications.
Oh yeah. No, I wasn't suggesting it's just a swipe of a pen.
So, I'm sure and I don't know the exact logic of the 2% versus the 3%, but if you look at inflation over time and how prices increases and so forth,
right.
I'm sure there is a method to the madness on that. I think though, in that article, as it points out, right, is that, yeah, there was a blowout, but if you start to look again, if you start to peel the onion a bit, and this is sort of some things I've been saying, at least in the consumer world is, there's potentially some issues. And,
oh yeah.
And there was an interesting statistic I heard the other day, I think it was on CNBC, where they did a survey and they said 67% of the people they surveyed were concerned about their finance related to holiday shopping and were planning to spend less.
Oh, it's got to be higher.
Right. 67%.
Yeah, no, I think if you got to look at it, I bet it's higher. I mean, I understand that was a survey. I bet that actual number's higher.
Well,
I mean, I can't imagine.
But it seems very high to me, right?
It does.
If you have people that are like, looking at their Christmas or their holiday shopping and going, hey, I'm going to have to cut back. And again, you start peeling the onion, credit card debt and all those other things. So now I understand that's a consumer world, but we are driven by consumers, right? Our economy is driven by
Yep.
consumers at a macro level. So, I think there's a lot of conflicting data that we keep seeing. We'll have to see how I think the next 2 to 3 months are really going to tell the story. And I think the holiday season is really going to tell a big story on that.
Well, I think, there's a couple things that can happen out of that, right? With what you're describing. And I hadn't really addressed or thought about this, but the reality, I think, is one of two things happens. Is one, people spend dramatically less, and then we have the impact of that. And I'm going to throw a number out and say, unless you're probably in the 2 or 2.5% of the economy, from an earner standpoint, you're probably going to be spending less. There are people who, their mortgage is perfectly set at 2.9%, and they've been in the same job for tons and tons of years, and the price of eggs going up by $1 a dozen doesn't impact them dramatically. But I think the average person out there does likely have some impact to them in that setting. So I think a couple of things happen, right? Is the either spending goes way down, or to your point earlier, right, consumer debt goes through the roof even more than it is right now. And with the interest rates where they are, I don't think that's sustainable.
No, it's not sustainable.
You know,
And you add in again, I know a lot of people got 30-year mortgages and locked in, but a lot of people also got, 5/1s where you have the teaser rates. And
yeah,
there's a lot of things that haven't percolated through the system
yep.
yet, that I think are starting to percolate. And I think that's going to, between now and maybe the end of Q1, I think we're going to have a much more better visibility on what's happening there. But
Yeah, I think you're right with that. I was listening to another podcast earlier in the week, and one of the topics that they had. Now that the other side of this is that the four people on that podcast, I think all but one of them are billionaires, but they were talking about the impact of consumer debt. That says if it gets too much further out of hand, that the government's going to step in and do something. Right? It's like, okay, so wait a minute. Now, if you look at it and you say, okay, we're driving rates up to balance the economy, cool the economy down, but it's really having this negative impact because people won't stop spending. And that the fact that they're not stopping spending is what's showing the driving up of the economy. We're in this infinite loop of frustration that then there's that risk that the government comes in and has some impact on the credit that's going on out, the credit being driven up out there. So it's a weird thing happening.
yeah, it's
Well, the one ray of sunshine I saw out of that article was that one of the comments from one of the board of governors was that, they said endorsements for higher rates have become rarer and rarer among all Fed officials since July. So I think that,
yeah, I actually personally do not think we will have any more rate hikes, but I don't think it's because I think the landing is going to be harder than everybody keeps talking about, with the no landing or the soft landing. So I personally, this is just my personal take, because I don't think we'll have more rate hikes, but I do believe the landing is going to be harder than what we've been talking about.
yeah.
But, again, hey, we all have our opinion, right?
No, I think, I listen, that's exactly right. But, I don't think that this cycle that I was just describing is right. It's not sustainable, right? Something
Mhm,
has to give to
mhm.
balance things out. And I don't know what that is either in this setting, but it's life's not simple. And you start thinking about, the just even looking at those 3 strikes that were going on, right? What were those people doing? Only a portion of them were out driving Uber or doing something else. And what happened? I'm sure all of those credit cards went up,
Mhm,
and that becomes a challenge, right? So,
mhm,
and credit's tightening in the same thing.
mhm,
So this should be an interesting time to watch. What's interesting is we both follow the news pretty well. Let me rephrase that. You follow some news closely. I follow it broadly, closely. It's probably a fair way to state it. But, you can find plenty of people out there, financial analysts and pundits that think that we're going to see some drops starting in Q2, and or others that are saying later in the year. But I kind of leaning towards the idea that something's going to have to give in this cycle by the
mhm.
second quarter.
I agree.
What it is, I don't know, but something's going to have to adjust because multiple years of this is not going to play out well.
No,
So
agreed. All right.
All right. Well, I'm going to go get an economics degree between now and next week so I can start saving
Probably a good idea.
this stuff. Yeah. So, anyways, just another quick article in there about manufactured goods orders were up 3% in September. So that's positive. It's up 6 of the last 7 months. So we're making more stuff in this country, which is a positive thing. It just goes back to, right, our audience here as manufacturers and wholesale distributors is who we bend these conversations towards. And it just goes back to all of the guests that we've talked to over the course of this year. Everybody in all of the events and shows and conferences we've been at is, while people might be looking a little cautiously at things moving forward, their businesses are strong, right? And so that's the one good thing we could take away out of today. So,
all right, should we move on to more AI? In fact, maybe we should ask AI what the economy is going to do and where we're going to be. That's probably the most accurate answer we're going to get.
Which model will you use to ask it that has most
well, we can look at different models. We can try different models and kind of balance everything out.
Well, where are we at with ChatGPT 4 is up to 2022. Is that right?
April of 23. April of 23.
Oh, it is. I thought it was still 22. Okay, April of 20. So that's reasonable to kind of start taking a look at then.
Yeah, but it's also if you it's now with the new release. If you start doing things that you need where it needs to go search the web because it doesn't have the data, it'll automatically go search the web using the Bing search engine and then bring back that data as well. So for all intents and purposes, it's for the most part up to date.
So that right there is a trigger for paying the $20 a month.
Oh, $20 a month is well worth it. It's the best $20 a month I spend. So
really?
Yeah, it's one of the best. Yeah, it's great.
Other than when you buy me a beer?
Pardon?
Other than when you buy me a beer, it's the best.
Yeah, okay. $20 beer. Yeah, exactly.
Well, so look, the Biden administration came out last week. We talked about it a little bit. In fact, it was the end of the week before.
Mahesh says he tried it.
Mahesh was our guest last week up in Toronto, and he tried it. Can't predict the future. Okay, well, there we go. So
that's why you come here to hear about the future.
Right.
Can't get that on ChatGPT.
That's right. Ask Mahesh. We should start a new show, separate show that just says Ask Mahesh, and he'll have it for us. But so, anyways, Biden administration came out with an executive order, right? So it's not law. It's a baseline of things. But we talked about the fact that it was out there, and I don't know how much time you've had to do much with it. I knew you're traveling this week, but I've taken a pretty close look at it. I started twice this week to start doing some writing. I wanted to write a lengthy post about kind of unpacking it a little bit, but it's quite interesting as you start to take a look at it, right? You got all that's going on in the EU, right? Then the G7 is starting to have some discussions about this. And then right in the time that there's a big event with a lot of tech companies in England, talking with the British government in London, you've got that going on, and the Biden administration comes out with this piece. And then a few days later, we come to find out that the real person behind the scenes that was driving all of this was former President Obama. It's pretty astounding if you look at this, because it's 111 pages. It's astounding to me the amount of data that they've put in there. And it's super specific and super detailed, but it's kind of weird. There's pieces of it. I want to be cautious here how I say this, but there's pieces of it that almost look like it's partisan in some ways. There's a whole section in there about diversity and inclusion. Now there's a piece in there about, what is it, V1B or whatever it is, visas. But then there's also big pieces in there about that foreign-born people can't have access to a certain amount of data. That's a defense issue. They've got, I think, 28 different departments within the U.S. government that they named that are supposed to have a chief AI officer. I mean, it just, the deeper you dive, I don't want to say scary, but it's quite interesting. I don't know. What are your thoughts on what it's kind of like a kitchen sink type thing.
Yeah, it's yeah, the one about the who has access to data, right?
Yeah,
Whether you're foreign or whatever. Yeah, we
right.
all, anyway, that's just, but I think a
It's
couple
a little
things,
absurd actually when
right,
you
right,
unpack that part of it.
right. But I think a couple things. First of all, this is not legislation. This is an executive order. So this is not law. This could be overturned by the next president or
Hmm.
anybody
Yep.
in a heartbeat. So it's more of a, like I said, we talked about it last week. It's more of a advice and direction than it
I
is.
think it's stronger. I think it's stronger than that because it's something that it's today in the U.S. I disagree with you a little bit on this, Tom. In the U.S., this is something that now is set by the executive order. You're correct; it's not a law, but now this is something that you could be sued for as the baseline standard in the U.S. Right? Because the government has put this out. Congress is going to look at it, but it is the seal of the state, the U.S. government that's right on the top of it. So I think if you want to start playing in the world of the lawyers, that now there's a baseline for people to kind of look at to base things against. So while you're right, it's not a law. It is their first pass that says this is what we expect.
Okay, no, that's fair enough. But it's the other thing that and I've had a chance to read it more and go through it more. And I touched on this a week ago when we talked about this, right? It focuses on all these systems and methods, like, and it looks
Right.
at how the AI works today or how it works. And it doesn't focus at all on what is the outcome or the result
Right.
of AI,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
The protection that we're trying to create is how do we create or how do we do things to avoid undesirable outcomes and undesirable results? But we don't talk about that. We
Right.
talk about
Agreed.
systems and method, or a lot of things in there are systems and methods and approaches that are probably going to be out of date in a month anyway, or 2 months or
Well,
3
and
months.
that's the trigger, right? That's the trigger that makes this so important, right? Is you're trying to say we want to look behind the kimono, so to speak, in your business, and government wants you, depending on the size of your business and the size of your model, to come and disclose all of these things behind the curtain, which technology companies have never done,
Mm-mm.
right? And I heard a great analogy with this earlier in the week. And a gentleman in the tech world said, he made the comparison. He said they're looking at systems and processes and want to regulate and dictate that as opposed to outcomes.
Right.
And the
I just
example
said.
that go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that's what I just said.
Yeah, no, exactly right. And the reason I reiterated is because he used a great example to your point. Is he said, look, it's like saying you can't commit fraud, but outlining all of the legislative groups at the government level and at the state level that are going to regulate you not committing fraud, and then show you all of the reasons that you have to show the government why you might commit fraud, instead of just saying, thou shall not commit fraud to the damage of these things, and then put some parameters around that. They went back and wrote 111 pages about the details of how you might commit fraud.
Of the systems and methods of committing
Yeah.
fraud. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And again, the systems and methods that are in use today are not the same systems and methods that are going to be used in 6 months or even in 3
Well,
months. And
yeah, I mean, with everything changing and evolving, right?
right.
Is that's, to your point, I think is critical from this standpoint. It almost looks like, we use sometimes the term in our business, we kind of use the term guardrails regularly. And I think guardrails need to be put in place that can be modified and changed, and it's interesting right now because, I mean, this may, I'm going to throw this out. You can throw rocks at it if you disagree. This might be one of the few things ever that globally needs to be agreed upon because of the ramifications and the impact that it has on the world order, the economies, science and medicine. The impact is, what's the number some people have used, 10 times or 100 times more impactful on humanity than the internet. And other people put where AI is headed to be as valuable to mankind as fire being invented, right? You hear these types of things. I kind of start looking at it as, well, is the UN functional or too dysfunctional not to be able to do something like this? Is it the G7 that's going to set some standards and then other countries follow? Something more globally than just the Biden administration saying here's 111 pages is going to need to come out of this.
Well, no, I complete again. If you take a step back and you look at what you're trying to accomplish, which is you're trying to accomplish putting guardrails, or I'll just go so far as legislation in place that is going to avoid the undesirable outcomes that we don't want from doing this, right?
Mm-hmm.
The potentially undesirable outcomes and results. That's not a national related issue. That is an international issue.
Mm-hmm.
So we can have all the guardrails or legislation in the world.
It's a
here in the
human
US.
race issue.
Right. It's a human race issue. It's China, India,
Mm-hmm.
all of those other places. And engineering and innovation nowadays is not a just inside your border,
Right.
type of thing. The projects that we do and the things that we do. I mean, you just start to look at this and go, a lot of companies, and we've done it, right, is you use offshore resources
Sure.
for engineering. Well, are those, it's like, starts to get really, really weird very, very quickly and unworkable. So as I said last week, I think it was a way to kind of show, look, we're doing something about this. But is it a practical thing? And, is it even something? Yeah. Could the lawyers rally around this potentially? Maybe, but there's so many ways around the systems and methods that they're talking about that I don't know. It seems very impractical to me. The article gave it a B-. I
Yeah,
gave it
right.
I give it more of a D+.
That's
It's
funny.
not a B- for that. So
No, I would agree. And it's interesting, that particular article is from CIO, Chief Information Officer magazine. And there's some nice points in there as well. But it was it didn't address the depth of it. And part of it is, if you start thinking about it, this could very quickly be no different than, chip manufacturing in China versus, the rest of the world, or software development in India and so forth, and the things that are happening, in these pockets that are good for that unique country. And one of the issues here is, I think there's some what do you call it? There's some things that can hamper, right, what happens in the U.S. that come out of this, right? This could become, if it stayed in place or became law, right? Now, to your point earlier, right, is there is a possibility that a year from this month, there's a new administration, or taking place in January of 25, that could completely wipe this out if it's still an executive order, right? So that can change dramatically by administrations. But the other side of this is, the way it sits now is, if there's more openness and more flexibility and guardrails versus you will and thou must and so forth, in what comes in, say, India or China or other developing countries that are doing things, or even across the EU, the US could be looking, ahead at all of those other countries that are making better and faster and stronger advancements than are being done here.
Of course, no, it just potentially stifles innovation.
Yeah.
Again, we kind of hit on this last week, right? And it causes potentially people to go, well, wait a minute, I got to slow down. I got to think twice. I got to, and even companies not to move forward. So there's a lot. Or
do I want to open my company in the US?
Right. Exactly.
Right? You look at, all of the technology companies that went to Ireland when Ireland started offering all of the tax breaks and land for server farms and things like that, right? It's, somebody may pop up here all of a sudden, Kazakhstan might say, hey, no taxes, and we have a lot of flexibility with what you do with AI. So this is a pretty substantial issue that needs to be watched.
And I think Ron's comment, other than the part about you being right, is
RP is just showing wisdom there.
No, so he's, I think, right, we're in a global supply chain, and it's getting, closer and closer, as he says, every day, and AI is making it more visible. But even in our innovation, right, whether it's a supply chain or innovation or engineering, we're in a global world. And so, yeah, it's not like we're just doing things siloed in our countries or our respective regions.
Yep.
I do agree that, yes, something for this to ever have any practical application, any sort of legislation to have any practical application, has got to be looked at and have some consistency internationally. Otherwise, it is not going to accomplish the purpose. and it's going to cause more
Yeah,
harm in some ways than it is good.
totally on board with that. And the wisdom you see, especially in the first segment of what RP wrote, is great. But um, do you remember the book? I think it was Tom Friedman book, "The World Is Flat."
Hmm.
That was, I just looked it up real quick on Google, not on ChatGPT, but 2005, right? So we're 18 plus years since that book came out, and look at what happened. That book talks about supply chains changing, and we're all interconnected and so forth, and obviously earlier times of the internet taking advantage of that, and what's going on in AI, I think way beyond what we probably even realize or recognize, is that the global impact that it's going to have is going to RP's point, is just going to make the world
Yep. Yep.
that much closer,
Yep.
right? That much closer.
Yep.
And you start thinking about it. I was doing something on ChatGPT the other day. I can't even remember what it was, but it was something I wanted to share with you. And we were talking. It was something related to the service levels and supporting the customers at LeadSmart. And I was looking up some things to trigger some ideas. And with a click of a button, I took my AI searches, right, that I had refined to get to a place I wanted to start talking about. Clicked one button and typed in your name, and it sent it to you. And now we were collaborating. Now we were only 3+ hours apart, but we could be 7 time zones apart and collaborating live across an AI tool to do great things
Sure.
or nefarious things.
Hmm.
So, all right. Well, good discussion. This is something I think we're going to need to keep a pretty close eye on. And, I did a LinkedIn post this morning that one of the things we're trying to do here is, kind of be a resource for people in wholesale distribution and manufacturing to kind of help unpack, unravel, distill some of these issues that are going on. And so we're going to keep trying to do that every week. So I'm going to interject. We're a little more than halfway through this morning with the reminder that we're live. It's Friday morning, November 10th, 9:32, almost 9:33 Pacific time, where Tom and I both live. We're live on YouTube Live, Facebook Live, and LinkedIn Live. If you're watching us there, you're seeing the screen, which is showing these articles that we're discussing from the Around the Horn and Wholesale Distribution newsletter. If you are listening and not watching, which the far larger part of our audience is doing, then you are not seeing that newsletter that we're discussing. We try and mention those articles and where they came from, but if you would like to get that newsletter, just reach out to us. You can let us know by emailing us at hello@leadsmarttech.com, and that comes in and we'll get you signed up. Or faster, simpler, more immediate is go to www.aroundthehornpod.com. All of our previous recorded podcasts are there, available for you, and you can sign up for the newsletter there. So always like to plug that in so that people aren't confused that are listening versus watching. So the next article, Tom, why don't you take it away from there on discussing that?
Yeah. So speaking of regulation and new models,
Big
Amazon,
models.
yeah, and big models, Amazon is working on building their own big large language model to compete with, Microsoft, OpenAI, and
Right.
Alphabet.
Surprise,
Um,
surprise.
yeah, but it actually makes sense because what you're finding, where Microsoft in particular is really starting to, and if you look at their stock, I think it's all-time high again today, is really taking off, is because it's fueling their Azure platform
Yep.
and their cloud platform.
Sure.
Obviously, Azure and AWS. AWS is Amazon's version of Azure, their cloud platform. So I think, I know it's what it said in the article here, is that Amazon is really making this investment in Olympus to then make their platform and incorporate it into their Azure platform, their cloud platform, to make it even, much more competitive than what Microsoft's doing. What's interesting is, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what they do that is different, or it will be different, or how it will be different. Will it be tuned, if you want to call it that, fine tuned for more industry specific uses? These are all things that are to be determined, but yeah, looks like we're going to have another one.
Well, I think, yeah, to think this wasn't coming would be, I think, naive, right? When you think about, it's, I don't know what the differences or what the percentages are, but I know Amazon Web Services or AWS, their hosting platform, right, where the vast majority of technology companies are hosting at, is far greater from a market share standpoint than Microsoft's Azure. But Microsoft's obviously poking at that with what they're doing with their Chat GPT investment and what they're doing with Copilot. I sure wish they would open Copilot up to smaller companies. If you can make that happen, that would be great, Tom. But I'd love to play with that Copilot that they've done. But this only makes sense. What's interesting to me, though, in this article, it references a couple of things that stood out to me. That this talks about Olympus is what it's code named, right? Is supposedly going to have 2 trillion parameters with it, where OpenAI or ChatGPT 4 has 1 trillion parameters. So that's mind-boggling to me. Will you just, as because you're the AI guy from a technology standpoint here, describe a parameter?
Think of it as a connection, right?
Okay.
So something that's related to each other. So, again, if you have a sentence where I like cats, right? That's my sentence that I want to
Hmm.
do. Well, there's a lot of different connections that could be made to all of those different words, cats, and then that could be connected to pet, and that could be connected to types of
Okay.
types of cats, and all of those things. So every one of those connections is a parameter.
Is that
Um,
is a data point? Is that a fair
mm, I don't
that's
know
sort
that
of a
I would think of it more of a relationship or a connection.
relationship? Okay.
Yeah. It's more of a relationship. So the more relationships I can have in my model, in
Right.
theory, the more intelligent it can be and the more breadth of intelligence and depth of intelligence that it can have. So, that would be doubling the number of parameters that it has in there,
Okay.
but, of course, there's a lot more work going on to continue to increase the number of parameters that these different models have.
So maybe give us a little bit of scope, if you don't mind. And I probably, I don't mean to put you on the spot here, but I will. 2 trillion parameters versus 1 trillion parameters. Is that exponentially different or just double? I'm
It's
thinking of the
it's
Richter scale, right?
it's yeah,
You're going,
I mean, numbers wise, it's double, but exponential value is exponential
okay, great.
because you're now able to go to think of it as going to another level. And this is the difference, right? This is what makes, I think, what is making AI more valuable than humans in terms of their ability to think, right? We can go a certain breadth and we can go a certain depth in our thinking, but at least in certain time frames. The more deeper that they are able to go with these models, and the deeper the number of parameters and the number of relationships there, allow to get answers faster and deeper in some
Yeah.
of the things that are there. So it allows those prompts and allows the directives to be more sophisticated and more just intelligent, for lack of a better word.
Okay.
So
So
the
bigger,
value
better,
can be
faster,
exponential.
stronger. Yeah.
Pardon?
Bigger,
Yeah.
better, faster, stronger, more valuable outputs.
But exponential value
Yeah.
may not be exponential size, but it's actual exponential value based around what they're able to do.
Which is why I asked the question,
Yeah.
because I think that really matters, right? So, I mean, the average Joe, that okay, it's double, going to be double what Chat GPT is now. My assumption would be, right, as Chat GPT continues to grow, they're going to be at 2, then 3, then 4, just as Olympus will grow and other models are going to grow with all those parameters as well. So,
Mhm.
uh, all to the benefit, right, of the users. Um, but I think it is quite interesting because, and I wish I had some data closer at my fingertips here, but I think the average person that is listening in with our podcast would be astounded if they looked at the list of software products that they're familiar with household words almost to most people, that are running on AWS or Amazon Web Services, right? Which is the only thing, I'm going to say only thing, the first thing within Amazon's whole world to become profitable, right? So I don't know the number of data centers around the world, and it's not to slight Microsoft in any way, but from this whole standpoint, this was really where Microsoft Amazon took the lead. And so I think this will be interesting. The last thing that I'll mention regarding this article is what I thought was kind of interesting, and I'm a fan of. In fact, let me see what happens here. Alexa, who is Rohit Prasad?
Rohit Prasad is a senior vice president and head scientist of artificial general intelligence at Amazon. Prasad joined Amazon in April.
Alexa, pause. So I don't know if you could hear that, but Rohit Prasad is the executive vice president at Amazon that's running this project, that also was the guy behind Alexa. So
Okay.
kind of an interesting time.
Don't say Alexa again.
Correct. Yep. So Simon, our friend in the UK with Optimizely, thank you for that. 125 data centers, right, for Amazon. That's astounding.
Yep.
So,
And growing.
it's happy hour, Simon. Cheers. He's Simon's in the UK, so in England. So glad to have him with us. A new partner relationship that we're just getting ready to do the big announcement with Simon's company Optimizely and their e-commerce solutions that we're integrating in with LeadSmart. So going to have a webinar very shortly with Simon and one of our other partners to be announced very soon. So let's kind of jump ahead from a time standpoint right now. Ace Hardware struggles after a malicious cyber attack. This is a big deal. You and I were talking earlier today, about how moving everything to the cloud can greatly reduce the risk of these things. Very beneficial, but it doesn't fully eliminate those things. But, we talk about, Ace Hardware, and their model is, independently owned co-op. And so these are, the big company, right? The co-op itself is what got hit, but it was a big, big issue for them. It kind of shut down. In fact, they, what was the quote on that? I wrote it down, but their internal operating system, which was AceNet, which is the big tool. I've done business with Ace a few different times over the years. So AceNet is their internal big system, their warehouse management system, their retailer mobile assistant, their hot sheets, which is all the updates on specials and stuff that go out, their invoicing system, their Ace Rewards customer system, and their customer care center's phone system were all either interrupted fully or were ended up getting suspended out of it. So they explained that 196 of their servers were hit during the attack and are undergoing restoration. Now, that may be easy for, one of our customers at LeadSmart or someone listening here that says, hey, I'm a regional electrical distributor with 15 branches, and, that's, Ace, and that's just what's going to hit them. This isn't going to impact me. Well, Brooke Sutherland, who covers distribution and manufacturing for Bloomberg, speaks regularly at industry conferences that we attend. She just published an article earlier this week about small, mid-sized manufacturers, and you can plug right into the end of that. Distributors are a major new attack center. So something I mentioned to you earlier, Tom, I think it's something we're going to start maybe talking some more on, maybe get a guest or two on that in the coming new year that can help with those discussions about cybersecurity for small and mid-sized businesses.
Yeah, I was at a meeting yesterday and around with a company that is in the cybersecurity space. And the amount of emphasis that is going on in 2024 as term and even the government in terms of if you're a government contractor or anybody who's doing work for the federal government in any way, shape, or form, the level of scrutiny that is going to go on in order for them to get a contract is greatly increasing. They're having levels of compliance and certifications and so forth that are being implemented. And the reason being is companies are moving to the cloud more and more at that time. It's, and they're modernizing, right? Cybersecurity is taking or security in general is having a real major impact of that. This is an area that I've had a whole lot of exposure to, but it all makes sense as I started to connect the dots. It's like, it's great to be modernizing to cloud. It's great to be modernizing to AI and, other technologies, but you also have to be modernizing in your use of security and what you're doing on, even if you're not government or not, if you're just any business. So,
well, and I'm glad you shared that. You think about it, right? If you even look at, wholesale distribution. I'll just most specifically talk right now about the US, but I would think it's this way. I'll say North America, right? There are plenty of $250 million, $100 million companies out there that are still operating a server in a closet down the hall, right? And their technology platform, their ERP platform, whichever it may be, is 15, 20 years old from a technology standpoint. Their servers, maybe they updated their servers 5 years ago, but IT for them sometimes is, and I don't mean to throw rocks at anybody, but just reality. In some instances, it's, well, we go down twice a day and make sure all the green lights are on in that closet where the servers are, right? And we put an extra HVAC vent in there to cool things, and that's where we're at with it. And the idea of cybersecurity or protecting that server and their data, which could be, years and years and years of ERP and customer data and employee data and so forth. It's I think cybersecurity is something, as I said, it's something we should take the responsibility to start talking about more on this.
Yeah.
On what we do
And
each
what I
week.
also believe, and we'll move on here, but we've talked a lot about using security just to avoid shutdowns or malicious things here. But you also have, data, right? As data becomes more valuable, you want to protect that data so other people aren't able to take that data and use it to drive whatever models or whatever they're trying to do. So there's a lot of aspects to security. Like I said, this meeting I had yesterday was a bit of an eye opener for me because I haven't had a whole lot of exposure to it, but it makes total sense. And this is a perfect example of it.
That's great. Well, we'll continue to work on this because it's an issue. And I was just in closing on that. I was at an industry event in early October and was talking to maybe it was a little earlier than that, but I was talking to a gentleman who's family-owned manufacturing company here in the U.S. and they got hit about 18 months ago, where all of a sudden messages showed up on every computer screen in their company. Turned out after about 2 weeks of them almost being shut down, that they found out that the company had, or the hackers had very limited data. In fact, part of it was more of a hoax to get some money because they couldn't document or show that they had anything. And then when they started pushing them and calling them out on, anyways, it all went away, but not after literally scrubbing multiple servers, every computer in the company completely reformatted, tens of thousands of dollars of time.
It's a pain in the ass. It's a pain
Yeah.
in the ass, right? And that's the understatement of our day. So
Yeah, there we go. Good. Let's jump ahead. So each week we also have an article in here called Tech Talk. We won't spend a lot of time on it, but this week, good article about generative AI and what's described as the industrial metaverse. Tom, any thoughts on that? We can kind of move quickly on this.
yeah, no, I don't. We've talked a lot about this before: digital twins and
Yep.
using things in the metaverse.
It's happening faster and faster, though.
Yeah, what I didn't see a lot of in here is talking about how generative AI will fit into that. But I think you will see more of whether it's predictive AI or the metaverse or some of the things like that, using generative AI to make it even better and more accessible.
Right.
So kind of a layer around it, if you will. But anyway, decent article, definitely worth taking a look at.
That's great. Very good. Appreciate that. We'll kind of pop ahead. We do our industry news and industry scuttlebutt as we describe it each week. And Hardy, the HVAC and refrigeration distributors group, they showing some economic results for their members in September. So a little off, 4% slide. That's not a great place to be, but hopefully that turns around fairly quickly. Some good results that reported from Fastenal. But the other thing we have in here, we get a lot of data and we are greatly supported by the folks at Modern Distribution Management. And I think Mike Hockett's with us today there, one of the managing editors there. But they did a podcast that I published here about Amazon Business, and the description is I'm just getting started. But, a lot of people look at, Amazon as the devil in the Amazon supply side of things, and more particular Amazon Business. And I think this is I listened to, excuse me, earlier in the week, only about half of the podcast, but I think it's a good discussion about the gentleman that is leading that whole group. He's been with Amazon I think since there was, they were just selling books and records and tapes and CDs. And so I think it's well worth the time, because Amazon supply it can be the devil, but it could also be your best friend if managed correctly by both manufacturing and distribution. So well worth a listen on that standpoint. So
Yeah, and I haven't listened to the podcast, but just think about what we just talked about with the new Olympus model. I
sure.
mean, they're going to incorporate that into everything
Oh,
they're doing. So all of a sudden, a lot of Amazon, whether it's Amazon for consumer, Amazon for business, there's going to be a lot more AI capabilities incorporated in there.
yep. Very good. So, kind of following up to that, we won't go into this one, but we have another feature article there about, it's in our special feature that we do each week, and it's from um, e-commerce 360, and it is referencing as manufacturers go direct to B2B buyers, distributors must digitize and to survive. I'll just say, just because of time, we won't go into depth on it, but it's not as doom and gloom as that might sound. But there is a wonderful opportunity right now that could include Amazon as well, for manufacturers and distributors to truly partner on improving customer experience. And so often the time that we're seeing now is that manufacturers that are selling in marketplaces direct to end users are doing so because their distribution partners aren't in those marketplaces selling their goods on their behalf. So sometimes people are getting pushed into that. That's a hornet's nest of things to discuss, but it's well worth it to take a look at that article again. So our last one that we talk about each week, we have what we call a good read. This one talks about the science and brutal truth about online meetings. I think we've all in the last 4 years now, or coming up on 4 years, not too long, have learned the ins and the outs of how to try and stay awake for Zoom meetings and Teams meetings and so forth. But there's some good ideas and tips and tricks in there about how to host a better meeting and participate better in a meeting.
And I found it interesting, as the biggest complaint that people had is they're boring, right?
Clearly, they don't come to our meetings.
Yeah, I mean, I do probably on any given day 4 or 5, 6 Zoom meetings a day. Boring would not be what I would consider. To me, the bigger issue is stringing all of those, 4, 5, 6 meetings together, and then all of the to-dos and all of the follow-up things that come out of those 5 or 6 meetings, and that gets compounded over the course of a week. And we've talked a lot in the past about sort of quality of life and making work more efficient. Anyway, I would just find it was interesting, and maybe this is true in maybe bigger companies or whatever, where it's just like you get on there and there's really nothing to do. But boring to me seemed like the least of the things that that we
Yeah.
deal with.
Yeah, I think people in large organizations get and this is no different than when you got summoned to walk down the hallway, right, to go to a meeting that another department was having, but they thought you should be there. And I think that's where this ties in. I think it's at all of the Elon Musk's companies is people are encouraged to leave meetings. I think it's the mantra is, if this doesn't directly impact what you're working on, or you don't have something significant to add, get back to work.
Yeah.
And it's not questioning whether somebody wants to or not. They just leave.
Yeah.
So, but anyways, I thought that was interesting. What's one of the first co-pilots that I'm looking for me is, and this is really a good example of AI, right? Is Zoom will give you an AI recap of your meeting, right? I use Fathom video recorder to record my meetings. It gives me an AI transcript. It's pretty weak still when I read those, but I want something that comes out of there, not just as I have to go read it, but much like the Genius Feed feature in Lead Smart that says, not just here's what you should go spend your time on, and here's what customers you should be talking to about what topics, is something that comes to me as a reminder, like Genius Feed does in Lead Smart, that says, do this after my meeting. So when I finish a meeting with a prospect or a channel partner of ours or whoever it might be, it says, I'm putting these things on your calendar that you committed to. Is it okay? And I click yes.
Yeah.
You
Well,
need to send him these things.
Where we're going, and I'm sure we can even be done, I haven't set it up, is you could take all of your meetings from the day, feed it into AI, and then have AI come out with a summary of the things that you need to go do. not just a to-do list, but in theory, then provide insights on what to actually go do, like why you should do this.
Or I've asked your virtual assistant to do these
Right,
things, and
right,
you need to do
right,
this still.
right. And that is
Okay.
coming as well. So
Yeah, next Tuesday, can I have that?
yeah, no, it's actually it's really it's the technology is there. It's just all
Yeah.
the mechanics of setting it up is still not
Yeah.
100%. But
Good. All
yeah, I
right.
wanted
Well,
to just touch on Ron's comment before he left here because he did listen to the podcast that we were just talking about, the MDM podcast. And what I
Yep.
find interesting here is he said a lot of conversation about customer engagement and how they respond to today's customers.
Mhm.
When you think of Amazon, right, we don't think of customer service so much. We tend to think of, that's what we get from potentially a more local or regional type distributor. But obviously they're putting more and more emphasis, and it'll be interesting to listen more on that podcast about their customer engagement. So
Good. Well, we'll chat about that further after you've had a listen. So Modern Distribution Management, they put out a ton of great content, share other good content out there that they share back on their platform as well. So we appreciate getting info and feedback from Tom Gale and Mike and the whole team over there. So good stuff. Boy, we covered a lot of ground today. I think some insightful and impactful. I'll say impactful, not insightful. Others can decide if it's insightful. But the AI discussion about the regulation, I mean, that is something we need to stay on top of very closely. We'll see what happens with the economy in the coming months, but I think very much something that we need to be watching more and more closely as a cybersecurity issue. And I think we can, as our podcast here and Around the Horns, that's something we can kind of try and take some thought leadership in to help our listeners. So, Tom, anything exciting for the weekend?
I hadn't thought about it that much yet. So
Okay, well, it's 10 o'clock on Friday. So
yeah, I better get on it.
yeah, very good. All right. Well, Tom, thanks for this today. It's always a pleasure. I'll sure chat with you again later in another online meeting that we have in
Right.
just
That's right.
in a half
On
hour. But
our boring Zoom meetings.
yeah, that's
All right.
it. So, but we'll thank everybody that was with us today. We appreciate your comments, your support again. Just hammer on that like, subscribe, share button wherever you happen to be listening to us. Leave a review if possible. It's very helpful to us to get the message out further. As I mentioned earlier at the start of our broadcast today, that each week our audience grows and globally, and we're going to try and keep doing a better and better job as we wind down this year and go into man, it's where are we at today? What is 65? 66. 66th episode. So we got to figure a party out for 75 or something like that. But astounding that next year we'll be at number 100. I think it's something like 90% of B2B podcasts don't make it to 10. So happy that we're here. Appreciate everybody's support. As always, have a great weekend. Enjoy yourself. Have fun. Be safe and be kind. See you next week.
Yep. Have a good weekend.